Welcome, everyone. We're so glad to have you here today. We are just going to give it about 1 minute to let participants come into the room and get settled. So we'll just give it 1 minute and then we'll get started. Okay, looks like people are still coming into the room, so I'll just give it just a few more seconds. We'll wait till those entrants start to slow down, and then we'll jump into things. Okay, we are going to get started. Welcome to today's webinar, Attachment, Understanding the Impact of Early Childhood Trauma for Refugees and Immigrant Children. We are so pleased to have everyone join us today. My name is Beth Farmer, and I'm the director of the International Rescue Committee Safety, Health, Education Technical Unit within our Resettlement, Asylum, and Integration Department. Today's webinar is being presented by the Center for Adjustment, Resilience, and Recovery, which is a project of International Rescue Committee, or IRC. IRC is a humanitarian organization founded almost 100 years ago at the behest of Albert Einstein, and we provide support to people impacted by conflict and crisis in more than 40 countries in 28 US cities. Our goal at the Center for Adjustment, Resilience, and Recovery, or CARES, is to ensure quality mental health and psychosocial support services for children and families who have experienced forced displacement. We do this by working with communities and the developers of evidence-based practices to adapt interventions so that they are linguistically accessible and culturally appropriate. We also provide resources and supports so that agencies trusted by families and close to the community can learn and deliver evidence-based and evidence-informed interventions. And we provide free training and technical assistance on issues related to forced displacement and serving forcibly displaced children and families. Today's learning objectives are quite simple. We hope that through our esteemed speaker and your questions and participation, that you leave this webinar feeling you have a stronger understanding of early childhood trauma in the context of forced displacement, especially as it impacts normative developmental fears, and most of all, that you walk away with strategies you can use in your daily work with children and families. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Today's webinar is being recorded, and a recording will be made available at CARE's website shortly after the event. We will be sending out an email right after the event with resources, including our feedback survey and where you can link to the recording. Because of the size of the webinar, everyone attending the webinar will be muted and the chat function is disabled. However, you can ask questions through the Q&A function, which you can see at the bottom of your screen through the red arrow. We will work to answer questions throughout the webinar in Q&A, and we'll aim to have 10 minutes at the end of the webinar to address questions. You may also turn on the closed captions by going to these three dots where it says More and choose the closed caption functioning. And now it is my great pleasure to present Dr. Alicia Lieberman. For almost 4 years, IRC has had the pleasure of working with the University of California, San Francisco, as we sought to ensure that children and families that we served had access to rigorously researched interventions that helped strengthen and support families so that they could heal and thrive in their new communities. We began working with UCSF F on the intervention attachment vitamins, adapting it in partnership with communities so that it was culturally responsive and linguistically accessible. Together, we have now worked with numerous community-based organizations to adapt and implement attachment vitamins with groups as diverse as asylum-seeking mothers from the Northern Triangle, caregivers from the Democratic Republic of Congo who have arrived to the US as refugees, and humanitarian parolee caregivers from Afghanistan. We have found attachment vitamins and UCSF to be strongly rooted in cultural humility with a centering belief that no one loves their children more or cares more what happens to them than their parents. Our speaker today, Dr. Alicia Lieberman, developed attachment vitamins as well as child-parent psychotherapy. She is the Irving B. Harris Endowed Chair in Infant Mental Health Professor and Vice Chair of the faculty at UCSF Department of Psychiatry and Director of the Child Trauma Research Program at San Francisco General Hospital. She directs the Early Trauma Treatment Network, a center of the federally funded National Child Traumatic Stress Network. Her research involves treatment outcome studies with traumatized young children from low-income and underrepresented minority groups. She has authored a book for parents, The Emotional Life of the Toddler, translated to several languages. Her professional books on childhood exposure to violence have been translated in several languages, including versions in Arabic and Hebrew, that are used to increase understanding and foster dialogue between Israeli and Palestinian service providers. Born and raised in Paraguay, she received her professional training in Israel and the United States. This cross-cultural experience informs her commitment to culturally responsive services and to increasing access and raising the standard of care for low-income and minority children and families. She is the recipient of numerous awards, most recently the 2016 Renee Spitz Lifetime Achievement Award from the World Association of Infant Mental Health, the 2016 Public Health Hero from the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, and the 2017 Whole Child Award from the Simsman Institute. You can tell from that brief bio how excited and how honored we are to have Dr. Lieberman here today. And with that, I will turn it over to her.
Beth, thank you so much for this wonderful introduction, particularly for your description of what your absolutely crucial organization does for the world. This is sacred work that you and the audience are doing, and it is a great privilege to be here today. Thank you very much. As Beth said, the topic today is thinking of attachment as a secure base, as an inner place of refuge in a world that has collapsed in terms of uprooting the child and the family from everything that they knew, everything that was familiar, when they see their own countries, their own cultures being damaged in just profoundly destructive ways by civil war, by terrorism, by the need to flee in order to protect one's own physical integrity. And as an immigrant myself, coming from generations that have needed to flee, I know that there is a part of oneself that is always longing for our home of origin. And we need to recreate homes away from home. And for young children, the attachment relationship is the best way of creating a sense of safety, predictability in an uncertain and often frightening world. And the fact that you are doing this work and creating communities that help parents do this work for their children is something that is profoundly valuable and that I deeply admire. I want to remind all of us of the wonder of childhood, the wonder of the early years, because I think that reconnecting with the impetus of healthy development gives us energy to do the work. Children have an amazing resilience, but that resilience is fostered by their trust that there are grown-ups that are there to witness it and to support it. And I like to think of early childhood as having three main components. One is discovering the world through the new skills that are developed. I can walk, I can use words, I can act on the world, and then the world responds. I can open a bottle and drink the content of the bottle. I can open a box and see what is inside the box and retrieve it and play with it. Every one of these seemingly ordinary actions says to the child, you create realities, you have the power to act on the world responds to you. And that in turn gives a sense of power, competence, pleasure that we all can help the child develop. Then they also discover other people. Attachment serves as a secure base. We talk about attachment as the turning to a person we love, the parent, the grandparent, in moments of uncertainty, in moments of fear, to say, will you protect me? And attachment is balanced by the wish to explore the world, to discover the world. But it's hard to discover the world, it's hard to venture out on the world if we do not have an inner compass, a sense of, if I am frightened, if I am uncertain, I can turn to my loved one for reassurance and protection. And so the secure base is the parent as a place to turn to when the discovery of the world becomes overwhelming. And in the process of doing that, the child discovers what we call theory of mind. Parents don't always think the way the child does. They have their own agendas. The teachers have their own agendas that are very often different from the child's agenda. And the discovery that there are many ways of looking at a situation, that the child might not want to leave the mother's side, but might need to leave the mother's side in order to go to preschool, for example, and that there will be somebody helping them to do that. That makes the child think, the world of others has many facets, and what I want is not necessarily what another person wants. And so I need to figure out how to assert what I want and need, and also be responsive to what others want and need from me. And with that comes an awareness of social expectations, what the child is allowed to do, what it is forbidden to do, and along those lines, what is good and what is bad. One little boy said, Mom, is it true that I can want to bite my brother, but I can't really bite him? And the mother said, that's right. You can want to do something, but you cannot bite your brother. And the child was given a lesson there about it's okay to feel things, but it's not always okay to act on what you feel. And in that process, they are discovering themselves. They are exploring their own emotions, just as little babies discover their body by, for example, putting their finger in their mouth, putting their toes in their mouth, looking at themselves in the mirror and saying, oh, that's me, which happens at about 18 months, learning to name feelings. I'm sad, I'm mad, I'm glad, and discovering I'm a boy, I'm a girl, you are a boy, you are a girl, all these enormous discoveries. All of this is part of the wonder of the first years of life. And in that process, as I mentioned, attachment is a secure base to come back to, particularly for refugee families, for populations that have been forcibly displaced. There are three recurrent aspects of reality that are never far from consciousness. One is immediate danger. Another one is the uncertainty of what will life be like. Will we find safety in our new home? Will we be able to thrive? Will our children be able to thrive? What will become of the family? How much continuity will we able to have? Will our practices, our cultural values survive and be respected in the new environment? Will we create a feeling of belonging? And in that context of anticipating danger, responding to danger, managing with uncertainty, the continued effort to survive, to grow, to thrive. And attachment is the trust that those that we love will care and protect us. And that is the foundation of emotional life for children and for adults, because attachment continues through the lifetime. And as a pillar of a therapeutic attitude, for those of us who work with people who are so traumatized by their difficult circumstances, by the danger that they went through and the uncertainty that they continue to experience, understanding, accepting, validating, normalizing fear, anxiety, irritability, anger as understandable reactions to overwhelming circumstances is a North Star that helps us as providers regulate our feelings and then model an attitude of interest, of compassion, of acceptance that in turn helps to regulate the feelings of the families that we work with. And for that, I think we need to cultivate a sense of perspective and convey to our clients a sense of perspective so that we can uphold basic values, basic convictions about what is right, what is wrong, what is allowed, what is not allowed, but also for young children, relax some expectations when there is heightened stress. Many parents, for example, say, I expect my child to sleep in his own bed, but when he's sick, when he's very scared, I let him come to bed with me and we cuddle. And then when he's feeling better, he goes back to his bed. And in that sense, we need to cultivate a sense of how to be with the child and the parent, how to engage in empathic problem solving in response to the problems of living and to emotional stress. For this, I think it helps to keep in mind what the expectable roles of parenting are. Number one, protecting the child from danger. Number two, responding to the child's physical needs for food, for shelter, for hygiene, for education, which is the part of socialization about what is allowed, what is not allowed. Giving the child a sense of reality, what is real and what is not. All 3-year-olds, for example, are afraid of monsters. Monsters are a metaphor for the overwhelming aspects of reality. And for example, one of the things that we find useful is not to say to the child that monsters don't exist, because for the child, monsters really do exist in the form of overwhelming feelings of fear in response to things that they don't understand. And so what we tend to do is to say, we are going to make sure the monster goes away. We're going to close the window. We're going to close the doors, and we're going to say, monster, don't hurt my little boy. And by aligning with the real message of what's a monster, we give the child a sense of danger exists. We understand danger. However you describe it, we understand danger. And we're taking steps to make sure that you are safe. And in that context, our attitude gives the child a sense that life is meaningful, that life is valuable, that their feelings are taken seriously. Now, in all these parenting roles, there are cultural differences. I come from cultures, the Jewish culture and the Latino Paraguayan culture. Both pay a lot of attention to how do we belong in community. In the United States, there's a lot of emphasis on individual wishes. And there is praise for individuality. Whereas in traditional cultures, there is often praise for knowing how to belong in community, how to pay attention to the needs and wishes of other people. And I've been in this country for 40 years, and I feel that I continue being acculturated because those early values of paying attention to what community expects of us take preference often to what I would like to do for myself in the here and now. And so for families that have been forcibly uprooted, the question of what space do their cultural values have in this new context? And we as providers need to align ourselves with their values, help them learn about the new values that they are encountering, and find a way of balancing the two so that they create a new sense of belonging in the new culture without giving up deep convictions about what is valuable in life. All of the functions of parenting are vulnerable to stress and trauma. When a parent is themselves overwhelmed by uncertainty and danger, by a feeling of incompetence about having been able to protect the child from danger, respond to the physical needs of the child, then there is impatience often, there is criticizing the child, there is judging the child, there is often punishing the child in ways that are very, very frightening for the child. And when we can connect to how the parent's own sense of vulnerability is fueling these behaviors that we wish they would change, then we can connect in empathy with what the parent's experience is and help them empathize with what the child's experience might be. And that is what attachment vitamins tries to do. Give a safe space for parents to talk about how their experiences in life are affecting the way they are parenting, and remembering or learning that anger is often a self-protective response against feeling powerless and afraid. Now, fear begins in the first days of life. Oops, sorry. And they have a function. There is the fear of separation, the fear of losing love, the fear of body damage, and the fear of being bad. And I will go into each of these fears at a little more detail. But one thing that I want to say is that they evolve, they unfold in the first 5 years of life, and they all have a functional, realistic role in the child's experience. And they are colored by the fact that the child often doesn't understand causality, the relationship between cause and effect. Separation anxiety, the fear of separation, is the first developmental fear. And it is quickly followed by the fear that they will be unloved if they do something that the parent disapproves of. And then there is the fear of getting hurt between 12 and 36 months. And then the fear that there is something intrinsically wrong with us and that we are going to be rejected by society. And I will start now by talking about the fear of separation, which is relatively concrete. For example, 1 and 2-year-olds cannot be sure that we continue to exist even if they don't see us, and that we'll come back to them after a separation. It's like the question of, do things exist if we don't see them, is still something that the child is grappling with. And also, young children have a very imperfect understanding of time. Time is very subjective for them. And it's interesting, I did not know that the International Rescue Committee was originated with Albert Einstein. And Albert Einstein said that time is relative, and he gave an example. He said, 1 minute is an eternity if I'm sitting on a hot plate, but it is goes in a second if I am doing something that I love. And when children are separated for 15 minutes from a parent that they love in a situation that they are scared, those 15 minutes can feel like an eternity. So that by protesting separation, the child is saying, I need you, I love you. Nobody makes me feel as safe as you do. When will you come back? Why are you so away for so long? And in that sense, I think that separation anxiety, the fear of separation, is the price that we pay for loving. We cannot love and not mind losing or being away from the person that we love. And many problems throughout life can be traced back to unrecognized and unaddressed separation anxiety, including severe sleeping problems, for example, pervasive defiance, unmanageable temper tantrums. They are often a response to fear that the parent is going to leave them. Our one of our colleagues, Chandra Ghosh Ipen, wrote a beautiful book for children and parents called You Were Not With Me, about children separate, which is really about 2 bunnies, a mommy bunny and a baby bunny. But it speaks for children that were separated at the border with Mexico. And it can be applied to all children who ever were separated from the parent for whatever reason. Now, separation anxiety, the fear of separation and loss, interferes with daily life. and it interferes with the parent's own emotional balance. Because when the parent needs to leave and the child screams inconsolably, then the parents often respond with their own strong emotions. We can feel manipulated, irritated, guilty, worried, empathic, helpless, and often we feel all of that all at once. And because of these strong feelings, parents can feel confused about how to respond to the fear of separation of the child, to the complaint, to the separation protest. And then their own self-protective coping comes into play. So they might just sneak away, or they can say, you are being silly, or stop doing that, or God forbid, physically punishing the child. And all the thousands of years of human experience with separation have given us tools for helping children and helping ourselves. And the formula is simple, but we need to do it. It's like exercising. You have to do it to get practice in it. And it has four main elements. One is to make sure that the child stays with someone that the child is comfortable with and that will take good care of the child in the parent's absence. Two is letting the child know that we're leaving, saying goodbye in a mindful way, maybe giving them a little transitional object, sometimes a pebble. We can say, this will show you that I will come back. And you can hold it in your hand to remind yourself that I will come back. And pretty soon the child will put the pebble away and go into the daily life. But taking the time to say goodbye mindfully is really important because it shows the child that separation is manageable. And then reunion, making the reunion meaningful and joyful, saying hello, saying, I'm so happy to see you, whether it's in words or in it's with a smile or with a hug. And then spending a little time with the child to restore a feeling of connection. So all cultures have developed games to help young children manage the fear of separation. Peekaboo, for example, hey, peekaboo, which peekaboo in English, but every other language has something similar to that. Hide and seek for older children. Toys like Jack in the Box, where you push a toy in a box and then poop, you make it happen again. It's hello, goodbye, hello, goodbye, hello, goodbye. Oh, it reappears, it reappears. Things continue to exist even when I don't see them. And games such as hiding an object and looking for it together and then making a big show of surprise and delight. And these games help to build emotional muscles for the child that prepare them to cope with absence. Then the next fear is much less concrete, is more diffuse, is the fear of losing love, losing approval, which is the flip side of young children's very normative wish to please adults, to please the parent. Young children assume that the world revolves around them. This is what Piaget called egocentrism. And psychoanalysts, for example, call magical thinking, is thinking that the world revolves around our understanding of how the world, and that our thoughts can make things happen. Children, for example, will say, my daddy left because I was bad. They don't realize that parents have their own agendas, their own and they think it's my fault. It's my fault that my mommy and daddy are fighting. It's because I'm bad. One little girl asked her mother, "Why is daddy mad at me?" And the mom said, "Why do you think he's mad at you?" And the little girl said, "His face is really angry and he's moving really fast." And the father was looking for his wallet and could not find his wallet. And he was cursing and going around the house saying, "Where the fuck is this my wallet?" And the little girl couldn't quite understand that this had nothing to do with her. She assumed that he was mad at her. So taking together the child's wish to please and the fear of disapproval are our most powerful tools, really, in socializing a child. It enables them to be toilet trained, to refrain from biting their baby brother, share toys, etc. And the wish to please and to belong is the early building block for a sense of social belonging, of social responsibility. And it helps children tolerate reasonable amounts of frustration when they're not allowed to do what they want to do. And for that, we need to help them disentangle the relationship between approval and love so that one can say, "I don't like it when you do this, and I have to help you not to do it anymore. And I continue to love you." And for that, repair after a conflict, coming together and having fun, doing something fun is really important. And we have to understand that there are many culturally diverse practices in managing disapproval. But I think that a continued message can be reminding parents that children never take their love for granted, and that either in action or through words, it's very helpful to say, "I love you," to a child. The fear of body damage happens between when the children start walking, and it's very functional because it is really because of fear of body damage that children are careful. And if they hurt themselves, young children are very vulnerable. We know that the first 5 years of life have the highest mortality rate in terms of accidental injury, accidental poisoning, but also in terms of child maltreatment. And children really worry that they are going to lose a part of their body. Many children get very anxious about having their hair cut or getting their nails cut. For example, one little girl was frantic when her uncle started nibbling at her little brother's toes. It was a 4-month-old baby, and he was going yum, 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 yum. And the little girl, who was 3, said, "He'll swallow his toes, he'll swallow his toes." She was grappling with the question of which part of the body stays with us and which belongs. And often difficulties toilet training are because they think of their poo-poos as part of the body. And so creating rituals about bye-bye poo-poo, bye-bye pee-pee. And again, many cultures have kissed the boo-boo, sana, sana, colita de rana in Spanish, so that from the adult's point of view, often a little scratch is nothing. But from the point of view of the child, it can say, "Look at what happened to my skin. Will it ever heal?" And so putting ourselves in the position of the child can really help the child feel safe, that we are going to protect them. And then the final fear that emerges in the preschool years is the fear of being bad. the fear of not belonging. 3-year-olds, for example, are really scared when they are doing something that is forbidden, but there's also something about their wanting to do something that makes them test the limits. And that's where the question of what do you believe, parent? What do you believe, teacher? And what do I want? That's where socialization comes in. One 3-year-old asked his father, do you still love me when I'm bad? And the father said, I will love you always and forever, but you're not bad. You are little and you are still learning what is okay and what is not okay. And I will teach you. And there are times that I get mad at you, but I still love you even when I'm mad at you. And the child looked visibly relieved about this and then ignored the father and went on in his own merry way. But it shows how helpful it is for parents to look under the fear of disapproval as a question that the child says, am I bad and will you abandon me? Now,
Dr. Lieberman, about 10 minutes.
okay, thank you. All of these fears are exacerbated by reality. And so when displacement happens, when the world collapses, the child is afraid of losing the parent, of not being loved, of being hurt, of being bad. And we have to think the parents' own early fears get awakened by this reality. And so we need to think of behavior as, is this developmentally appropriate? Is this because the child is particularly shy or anxiety prone? Or how does it fit in the environment? What is the quality of the attachment? What are the strengths that we can build around the child to help with these fears? And we have to think in terms of the world is a dangerous, uncertain place, and we don't always have the same strengths. One, for example, the picture of this wave on the right is a small wave, but it can be fatal for a 5-year-old. The big wave can be incredibly exciting for somebody that knows how to surf, but it would be lethal for an adult who doesn't know how to swim. So we have to take a look at what is the combination of the strengths in the child, the strengths in the parent, and the circumstances that they are dealing with. And think of a continuum from stress to trauma and think, are these dangers manageable? Like a parent going to work and reassuring the child that they'll come back? Or are they traumatic, like a parent and a child being separated for 3 months out of circumstances that were totally out of their control, and the parent and the child never knowing whether they could be reunited or not? And we know that early childhood trauma has an effect on the brain, on the body, on cognition, and on emotions. Nightmares, aggression, anxiety, conflict. And you will get these slides, so I will not elaborate on them, but you will have them as a reminder. Just as 2 examples, preschoolers that are exposed to violence have more relationship problems with peers and teachers in the form of negative affect, aggression, anxiety about separation, inappropriate responses, and early physical abuse predicts behavior problems 9 years later um, um, rather than physical abuse after age 5. So the first 5 years of life are particularly important in creating templates for behavior, so that a child who was abused at age 3 is more likely to be aggressive later than a child who was abused at 9, let's say, when they already have more functions that and coping mechanisms. So our body talks in the form of tantrums, reactivity, inconsolable crying, aggression, often without words. And we need to try to understand the meaning of behavior, even when it is not expressed in words. This says the same thing, so I'll just go over. So how do we build a secure attachment? We have to remember that the longing to be loved starts in the earliest years, that children often mistake disapproval for lack of love, that to help the child understand your mommy needs to go to work, your mommy got mad at you because you did something that she disapproved, but that doesn't mean that she doesn't love you, that she won't come back. And using what happened that might be triggering a particular behavior in the parent and in the child. How are they responding to circumstances in their environment or to memories of what happened to them in a way that floods them with negative emotion? And cultivate a sense of perspective and humor to tolerate the fact that we all have agendas that are our own agendas and that are often incompatible with each other. Can we become clear about our agenda is and what the other person's agenda is, and find a way of combining, of reconciling, of finding solutions to incompatible agendas, negotiating disagreements, so that when we socialize, we do that supportively rather than with judgment and with criticism. And the message here is always, how do we repair? We are all vulnerable to fighting, to aggression, to helplessness, to despair. How can we convey a message of, I will not be left, I will continue to be loved, hurts get better, I'm basically good, I can reconnect with my goodness, I can help you reconnect with your goodness. And I think that it comes down first and foremost to finding ways of caring for ourselves. The work that you are doing with forcibly displaced people, forcibly displaced families, erodes the soul. One sees so much of the destructive things that we do to each other, that the world does to innocent, vulnerable, good, loving people. And being constantly exposed to pain creates a risk of vicarious trauma and burnout. And we need each other. It takes a village. We need to be able to create moments of connection with each other and moments of connection with ourselves. And there's a lot of science now showing that taking small breaks during the day, 60 seconds, 90 seconds, to go inwards, to breathe, to say a little prayer, to look at the photograph of an image that we love, a photo of someone we love, flower, tree, look outside the window and see the clouds, having a sense of the cosmos as a home and our inner life as a home that we can go back to reconnect and get a sense of perspective. noticing when we're dysregulating and giving a meaning to it. I'm despairing, I'm angry, I'm feeling rage, I'm feeling incompetent, I'm feeling unsafe. And just that alone, and saying, this will pass. There's another side to me. There's another side to the world. And engaging in self-caring activities that engage our kindness to ourselves, taking a shower, going for a walk, smelling a flower. So that's what I wanted to say today. And I want to thank you for being here and ask if there are any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lieberman. We've answered some questions in the chat, but we'd love to take some others. Can we, if you guys have questions, can you please put them in the chat? Lena, do people have the ability to?
I am sorry, but I am not hearing.
You can't hear me?
Is there a way maybe of, because I was hearing before, so I'm just wondering.
Lena, can you let me know if you can hear me?
I can hear you, Beth.
Okay, thanks.
And I can hear this person who spoke just now very clearly.
Okay, then Huda, if you can, do you mind, Huda, go ahead and facilitating if there are things in the chat?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
So it looks like we don't have any open questions at the moment. It looks like most of them were answered. Just a lot of thank yous.
That's great. If there is thank you, I want to thank you too. I don't know, Beth, do you have questions?
Thank you so much, Dr. Lieberman.
Now I hear you very well.
Yeah, I took off my headphones. What would be one thing that you would say, what would be one thing you could say service providers could to tell parents when they're newly arrived to help them, to give them a sense of confidence or competence in navigating their children through this difficult period of transition?
Can I ask you, Beth, you have so much experience and wisdom. Could we have a little dialogue? What do you find has helped them?
You know, I would say that having worked with forcibly displaced families for a long time, many people think that they're the only one that isn't totally happy to be here, totally relieved, or having a hard time managing their own emotions and managing their children's, or feeling sad, or maybe wishing that they hadn't come. There's just so many layers of emotions. So the most important thing for me has kind of been that psychoeducation of many people feel many of these things. And if you feel these things, it's okay. And you can come to me and we can talk about them. And that includes feeling like you don't have the capacity to parent right now. Many children can be particularly challenging right now. So a lot of time it's really the education. And also because there's a lot of parenting programs out there, which I think sometimes tell parents, just because you went through a trauma, whether, you know, implicitly, not explicitly, somehow you don't know how to parent your child. But I think really speaking to, we know no one loves your child more than you, no one knows your child more than you, because people, the vast majority of people who flee and come to the US, they do it for their children. You know, they do it for their children. So they've already expressed the love in such a really important way. So I think that psychoeducation piece is critical.
Beth, I knew you would have the answer, and in a way, you are echoing. I think we're using the same language when I talked about validating, normalizing, giving a sense of community, saying there are so many people that have been displaced and everyone experiences what you are telling me. And the one thing that I would add, and I don't know how you feel about that, is when there are times that the parent does not feel so much love for their child. You know, particularly if it's an older child, or if it's a child that wasn't so wanted to begin with, or it's a child that is identified as the child of the man that abused me and looks just like the father, or, you know, there are many. Parenting is a very complex thing. And there are times I think that saying to the parent, sometimes it's hard to remember. When one's child is really just making one so mad, it's hard to remember that one also loves them, even when one is really angry with them. And that's just part of life. We can't always be loving. We can't always be kind. We can't always be supportive. Give yourself a break. Just make sure that you don't hurt your child. You can feel like hitting. Don't hit, because in this country, hitting is illegal. So there is kind of like this compassionate socializing, right? That it's okay to feel overwhelmed, to feel desperate, to feel rageful. How do we make sure that it doesn't get expressed in a way that is going to hurt you, parent, in addition, right?
Yeah, and I love you bring it back full circle to what you said at the beginning. So it's the parenting version of you can want to bite your brother, but you can't bite your brother, right? With just a few more minutes left, there are some questions, a few more questions in the chat. And one is about how does this, and I'm not sure that we can, it's how does this transfer to older kids? But I'm not sure we have time to answer that. We can try to put some answers and find some resources for older children. But it does seem like people have a lot of interest in attachment and older children as well.
And can I just say that it translates exactly. I wrote The Emotional Life of the Toddler, my book about toddlers, when my son was 15 years old, and he was driving me crazy. And it was a time when he said, I'm leaving. He was leaving the house, not leaving. And I had this memory of how I would pick him up and remove him from danger when he was 2. And now I could not do that. I could not pick him up and remove. And so, but I think that what we can say is, I want to make sure that you are safe.
Mm-hmm.
Don't forget to take care of yourself. Conveying to children, I am there for you, I care for you. We can be mad at each other, we can have different values, but I care for your safety and I care for your well-being, and I want to be here no matter what for you. Mm-hmm. I think that we underestimate how much older children need that message. I'm not going to leave you. I'm not going to stop loving you. I want to protect you from being hurt, and you are good. And even when you are doing things that are not allowable, there is a part of you that really remains good. I think these are really important messages to convey to children throughout their growing up years.
Thank you so much. And unfortunately, we're out of time, but we'll be looking at some of this, hopefully answering more questions and having more opportunity to hear from you and your whole wonderful team at UCSF. We've also put, once this program ends, You will get a chance to give us your feedback. Please do. We are always striving to improve and get better. There's also a link as well in the chat. And just as we leave today, a reminder that June 20th is World Refugee Day, which is a day that we all celebrate the hope and strength and resilience that refugees and other forcibly displaced people bring to the world, as well as the gifts and skills they have to give to the world. So please do find a World Refugee Day event in your community and go enjoy or volunteer. Thank you very much for being here today. And thank you so much for our featured speaker, Dr. Lieberman. It was truly a pleasure.
Thank you. For me, privilege. Thank you so much. Beth, this is so important work that you are and your team are doing. Thank you so much again.
Well, we're so excited to continue it with you and even think more about what we can do. It's just been a wonderful, wonderful partnership.
Thank you, Shilpa. Thank you. Thank you too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Be well. Bye.